So our 26th president, who also just happens to be my favorite president, is going to be Theodore Roosevelt. Okay? Now, Theodore Roosevelt's really interesting, kind of his story of how he actually becomes president. You see, he was actually the mayor of New York, or the governor of New York, is also the mayor. And the problem is that politicians didn't like him. Remember, there's a term that we learned, who really controlled the politics in New York during this time?
Boss Tweed.
Boss Tweed, Tammany Hall, and what is like the big word for all of that?
Political machines.
Political machines. Good job. Okay, good job, JJ. So, what happens is that the political machines are really controlling New York during this time. Well, the thing is that they didn't like him because he actually started wanting to learn from the people, right? He took people's ideas and he actually wanted to make change. He read Jacob Riis and he said, now we need to make tenement laws. Well, the problem is they didn't like that because they like controlling everything. So they had a great idea. Why don't you go become the vice president? The reason why this would be beneficial to him is because he could have a better political role. But at this time, and really up until Harry S. Truman, the vice president had basically zero power. There was really nothing to it. There wasn't a lot of impact and things like that. So if you make him the vice president, you get rid of him in New York. Well, there's a problem. The president, William McKinley, well, he got shot.
Ew.
Yeah, they assassinated him. And here's the problem with that assassination. When a president is assassinated, who becomes the president? Yeah, so who did they make the president? Theodore Roosevelt, even though they had tried to get him out of political power.
So are they the same people?
Who's they?
Yeah, who is they?
Yeah, you keep saying they.
Yeah.
The political machines wanted to get rid of him.
Oh, okay.
So they asked him and told him to go try to become the vice president. Yes?
If you're vice president and then you become president because the president dies, can you still serve 2 terms as president after that?
So, yes, you technically could. However, the term limits that end up getting set have not been able to apply to anybody who has been let go. So, for example, the person who supersedes JFK, which is LBJ, LBJ could have run for an additional term, but he did not receive the nomination from his political party. Same thing with a resignation. So after Richard M. Nixon resigns, same exact thing. The new person comes into the presidency, but if you know anything about Jimmy Carter has a 4-year presidency after that happens. That's basically completely plagued with scandal and things like that. And so what happens is that he couldn't really run. He wished he could have run probably, and I think if I remember correctly, he did, but he lost so badly because of some controversies in his presidency. So we haven't had anybody test it, I guess is what I should say. And hopefully we won't ever have anybody test it because we won't have somebody be assassinated or die in the presidency. Yeah, unless you watch cop shows or things like that. Now what happens is that he becomes the president and he begins to become very successful. By the way, fun fact, he's also our youngest president at 42 years old. Our oldest president is Donald Trump that we've ever had. He's like 68, 70, something like that. Okay, now listen. Shh. Now what happens is that Theodore Roosevelt is totally like super duper bad apple. What I mean by that is that he is going to be the guy that is going to be kind of striking the fear in people. When he was in college at Princeton, he actually was a boxing champion. He was a boxing champion in the Navy as well. When he goes into the presidency, he actually continues to box. He has his own boxing ring behind the White House. And oftentimes he would actually invite diplomats and things like that to box him during their meetings. One time, unfortunately, this went a little too far. A diplomat hit him into I believe it was the right eye, ended up causing him to go completely blind in that eye. Well, he wore his glasses for a lot of reasons, but not just for this. What? I think that would be considered a loss.
Undoubtedly.
Now, one thing about Theodore Roosevelt, though, is he loved the outdoors. That was something really big about him. For example, you can see in this totally real picture, he loved nature and animals around the United States. And the reality is that he was really well known for that. Part of the reason why, too, has to do with this picture right here. This was published all throughout the United States. The problem is it's completely photoshopped, and yes, they did have the ability to edit photos. You can actually see that this is a separate photo of him on a horse, and then they put the moose on it. But they published this throughout the United States, and everybody thought he's definitely the president that is the outdoorsman. Here's the problem, though. They needed something to really show that he was going to be the person that was going to go off and say, we should have conservation in America. And luckily, and I believe the group said this in their presentation, what happens is a really famous story. So he was a really big hunter. He would go off and leave the presidency for months at a time to go hunt. What happens is he goes for a hunt and he's hunting for bears, and unfortunately he can't find any. He shoots some, but he misses. It's not going well for him. It's the last day of the hunt. He hasn't gotten anything. Somebody goes up to him and says, Mr. President, come over here. I have something to show you. They had captured a bear, tied it up to a tree, gave him a gun, and said, all right, get your bear. He famously turns away and he says, I will not do that. That's unethical hunting. And he leaves. Well, what happens is a toy maker in New York hears about this story and creates a toy called the teddy bear. And what happens is that this teddy bear becomes one of the most successful toys in American history. You guys more than likely have had a teddy bear in the past. And the reason it's Teddy is it's short for Theodore. So it's completely named after Theodore Roosevelt. You can actually go to the Smithsonian and see the original teddy bear as well, if you want to.
Why does he look so sad?
I don't know. Okay? Now, here's what happens. And if you will make sure to write this down on your piece of paper, please. Okay? You need to know that the cause of all this, so if you'll just write down the word cause, this is the destruction of resources in the West. So Pablo, we don't have a ton of writing. You could probably just write this down. So again, destruction of resources in the West. So here's basically what happens, is that people are going west and they have a lot of problems. People are killing off the buffalo population. People are chopping down 100-year-old trees. People are over-farming it and completely destroying it. And the problem is because of that, the entire westward area is being completely destroyed. Now, Theodore Roosevelt wants to do something about that. And one way that he's going to do this is through what is known as the bully pulpit. And if you will write down this term and this definition, it's up on the board.
What year is this?
Theodore Roosevelt comes into the presidency, I believe McKinley dies in 89, and then he comes into the presidency, I believe he starts his first re-election in 1900.
It says 1905.
Actually,
It says 1905 on the
1905. That sounds about right.
1906.
Only then Roosevelt Taft. Yeah, that sounds about right. He serves one full term, somewhere's in there. So it's about 1905-ish, early 1900s. Now what happens with the bully pulpit is this is basically where he believes that a president should be a vocal point for what the people want. Basically, he's going to go in front of the media. He's going to do speeches. He's going to do everything that he can to be able to prove that this legislation is needed. Now, if you will put next to Theodore Roosevelt, he is the environmental president. Environmental president. Now, what that means is when you see Theodore Roosevelt and it's anything to do with the environment, you automatically know that this is the page that you need to be referencing. Now, what happens is that he becomes besties with a guy named John Muir, who's a double-star term, very important on the AP exam a ton. Now, John Muir is what you would call, and if you want to put next to his name, a preservationist. Now, what that means is he believes that we should preserve natural resources. So what happens is Theodore Roosevelt and John Muir go out for 3 months on a camping trip in the middle of the presidency. So imagine if, for example, your current president just leaves for like 3 months and says, all right, I'm going camping. Okay? That's basically what he decided to do. But in this case, what happens is that John Muir talks to Teddy Roosevelt and says, this is our problem. We're going here and look at all this beauty. It's just being destroyed. Are we getting rid of America? By the way, this is where he went camping. Anybody know where this is at?
Yellowstone.
Oh, no.
Yosemite.
It's Yosemite. That's right. So what happens is that at Yosemite is that they are going to have this trip and believe that they should start to be able to change things. So what happens is he's going to pass two very important acts to be able to make sure that this is going to last and be an American landscape. So you need to know the two acts, but the most important one out of them is the Antiquities Act. So I would star that one, the Antiquities Act. In theory, it should be on your paper if they did it right. Yep. So, with the Antiquities Act, let me explain what this is. And this is actually one that affects you guys, especially in the state of Utah. The Antiquities Act, what it does is it basically, and if you need to highlight it, or at least if you know it, whatever works, is that it sets aside federal land. That's basically what it does. It sets aside things for what is known as conservation, which means, yes, you can use the resource, but we're going to conserve it for the better of the United States. Now, what happens is that if you see, this is the original stuff. You can see it's mostly in the West simply because most stuff is privately owned in the East. This is how it looks like today. Everything in color is owned by the federal government. If you notice in Utah, for example, almost 68% of our land is actually owned by the federal government in the state. Now, this also is part of the reason why, for example, we have all the national parks that we do have in the state of Utah, is because of this set-aside land. So we're going to see if you know some common Utah places that are part of the federal government due to the Antiquities Act. And so far, I haven't been too impressed with people. You guys need to go outside more. I highly encourage you to do that. So we're going to see if you guys... The first one is the easy one, and then it gets harder from here. Okay, what location... Okay, you can't don't just say words yet. I haven't shown you the picture yet. Okay? So, here's the first one. This one's easier. Not arches, you're correct.
Is it Canyonlands? No.
Alright, good job, guys. It's Flaming Gorge. Good job for all those answers. Okay, that was the easy one, which automatically... it is on the Green River. Okay, good job. Alright, this one's the hardest one out of all of them. Nobody's gotten it yet. Been this one?
Promontory Point.
No, it's not the Great Salt Lake.
Promontory Point.
It's not near Promontory.
Sure it's not the
It's near Brigham City.
Oh, it's a fish and wildlife preserve.
It is a fish and wildlife preserve.
It's a bird something.
Yeah, it's called Bear River Migratory Area. So basically what happens is this is where birds can land when they're going north and south. Hey, if you're going to shuffle cards.
Hey,
Okay.
you know where they also
Cool.
do that?
Where?
The Great Salt Lake.
Yes, I know. Okay, but the Great Salt Lake isn't designated as that. So last one. One of my favorite places in all of Utah.
Oh, that lake.
That lake. Good job.
Bear Lake.
It's in the Uintas. Mirror Lake.
Silver Lake.
Okay. Mirror. I didn't hear you. You got to be louder.
I've been there.
Okay, Mirror Lake, Bald Mountain. Okay. All right. The other thing too, and if you want to put this next to the Antiquities Act, is the monuments, landmarks, and monuments. Now, what happens with the landmarks and monuments is that it also gives the president the power to create these. Presidents, depending on which political party they do, encourage more or less monuments in the United States. Let's see if you know some of our common monuments in the state of Utah.
That's the Devil's Tower, but it's in Wyoming.
There's a Devil's Tower here in Utah as well.
Isn't there a movie based off this?
This is in a ton of movies, especially if you watch John Wayne movies.
The one where like the aliens come?
Oh, please don't tell me. Are you being serious? Oh, my husband's going to be so upset when I come home.
Wait, what?
He said, who's John Wayne?
Wait, who is John Wayne?
Okay, John Wayne is an extremely famous, he did a whole bunch of cowboy movies in the 1960s. We will talk about him later. I will not show him this video. Okay. McClintock, she wore a yellow ribbon, Rio Grande. I just watched one on Sunday. Okay. So, here's the other one. Dinosaur National Monument, that's right. Now, I'm going to tell you to put something next to this as a reminder. It will trigger your memory. This is not a political discussion, though. Okay? No. if you will put next to this Trump. That was odd timing. Okay. All right. And then I would put next to this, and this one's a little bit, you have to listen to it. It's Grand Escalante. Escalante is Escalante.
With a little accent somewhere.
No. And then also, you can also put Bears Ears. Now, Bears Ears National Monument. But you just had to put Bears Ears. Now, here's what happened is at the end of Obama's presidency, he declared 2 different new national monuments or parks in the state of Utah. Grand Escalante was supposed to become a new national park, and then Bears Ears was supposed to be a national monument. What happened is in the very first week of the presidency, Donald Trump challenged this law, which we still don't know of the result because, unfortunately, the week after was the immigration ban, and so that kind of superseded this lawsuit. But the question became, can you take away monuments? Because that's what he did in the first week of his presidency, is he removed the ones that were just put in. So that's an easy way to help remember it, is here in the state of Utah. That's why like Patagonia had a huge thing here. That's why the Great Outdoor Show left Utah, is over taking away the monuments. So all of that stuff. Okay? So one more thing, National Park Service. The one that I will emphasize really quickly on the National Park Service is the fact that it was originally there before, but he kind of makes it what it's known as today. Now, really quickly, I have to introduce your homework because we're behind. Okay, so very quickly, on the muckraker one, quickly go to journalism. Quickly go to journalism. Quickly. Okay. In your journalism one, you are going to, I have to decide what I'm going to say here because we have like 30 seconds left. Okay, where it says the jungle on your journalism one, that's the Muckraker's Daily one. Okay, where it says the jungle, I want you to go ahead and star that term. Okay, you will learn about what the jungle does, read over it, and you'll have your assignment. We'll have to cover this, unfortunately, in that video. This is really, really important. So I don't think that they had it on here, but if you look right at the top of this, political cartoon, this is a political cartoon you have to know, and I'll explain it, unfortunately, in the video because we have like 20 seconds left. Okay? So, do your homework assignment on the jungle. Listen to the video on this, and make sure that you do that quiz. Okay? Also, by the way, review session Thursday and Friday. So review session Thursday and Friday this week. And don't forget that you guys have a test on Tuesday. Today's Wednesday. Okay.